Welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. Glad to have you on the show today. If you're a first-time listener, welcome to the conversation. Glad to have you. We're thankful for every listener. In fact, we want to thank our existing listeners that have come back. Because of our listeners and our great guests, we have rocketed into the top 10% fastest growing podcasts in the world, which is pretty exciting for you guys because there's over 1.5 million and sometimes 2. I'm not sure what the number is now, but 1.5 million, let's just say that podcast, that's a lot of choices for content. So thank you very much for tuning in. Now, a little bit of house cleaning before we get started is don't forget to subscribe. If you don't like the platform you're currently on, that's okay. We're distributed on 23 different platforms. We have listeners in 32 countries and on 6 continents. And if I could afford and figure out how to get cell phones in the hands of all of the penguins, plus a way to charge them again, we'd probably have listeners in Antarctica. So welcome to the program. Now, I am a well-dressed beggar. I am not afraid to, and nor am I ashamed to beg for ratings. So if you like what we're doing, please give us a 5-star rating. Comment. We love the conversation. So thank you very much for being a part of this. Now, if you're new to the show, our show is all about people and people's stories and common sense. You know, there's so many people out there that are great stories doing amazing things. And, you know, I like this phrase that I kind of came up with just recently is common sense is not extinct, okay? And it might be on the endangered species list, but the reality is it's nowhere near extinct. So we've got a great guest today to share with you. All right, last thing to stop by the website, okay? We're going to get into a lot of stuff today with today's guest, but like most of our guests, we can't even touch the tip of the iceberg. So stop by the website, rexandrewsshow.com, and you can get the bios and information and links to all of our guests. And we've just we've actually recorded about 126 or so episodes, so there's a lot of content out there to go check out. Amazing guests. Okay, let's get on with it. All right, today, got a special guest. I've been excited that she actually accepted and came on to do this. It's been a wild ride to get this going, but here she is. Okay, so I want to introduce her, and I'm telling you, this is a long list, but she's got a lot going on, and she's somebody you want to hear her story and tune in. So first of all, and most important, she's a mother of 3, and she can talk about some of those challenges and episodes. She's a podcaster. She's got a podcast out there. Now, this is really interesting, too. She's an author, and there's some interesting timing from one of her books. A TEDx speaker, and in fact, the TEDx speaker, she was monikered as the Global Positive Media Mogul. Okay, so that's a mouthful, so she's on top of that. And also, too, you're not going to believe this, she's a dentist, okay? And she's the founder of the Ever Widening Circles. And I know we're missing some items there, but what I'd like to do at this point in time is welcome to the show, Dr. Lynda, but her full name is Dr. Lynda Ulrich. So Lynda, how are you this morning?
I'm terrific. I am so excited to be here, Rex. This is just a lovely twist for me this morning.
Fantastic. You know, on the show, as we talk all the time, we talk about people's stories, and life is like crossing a stream in my mind. You know, you hop from one rock to the next rock, and sometimes you fall in the water, and sometimes you have to hop back and take a different direction. But the goal is to get across the stream. And so we want to hop across some rocks today as we tell your story and all the interesting things you're up to. So we want to go back in time, okay? And we want to know, because there's so many influencing factors as we grow and as we move along in life. So we want to know where you were born. Do you have siblings? Do you have siblings that survived your harassment? What your parents did when you were growing up, so types of careers and those types of things. And if they're still with us here, that'd be awesome to know a little bit about that. What you were interested in as a kid, you know, how you spent your spare time. And so don't forget, I'll give you all these questions. I'm not letting you off the hook. So whether it was sports or dance or theater, shoplifting, we don't care what it is. We want to know what you were spending your time is. And don't laugh about shoplifting. I have a guest that had been on, and by the age of 15, he was a known car thief. So you never know what people's lives are about. Also, too, then we want to learn about your education a little bit. What types of things did you invest in to make you who you are? And then we'll hopscotch through some of the things that got you to where you are right now and what you're up to and some of the things you're featuring. And your list is long, so I'm not sure. We may end up doing a couple episodes with you, Dr. Lynda. So let's take it from there. So if you could, take us back to when you were born.
So that's lovely. That's a lovely way to give people's ideas context.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Okay. So my context for being here with you today starts because I grew up in a very middle of the road place in central Illinois. In fact, so central Illinois that if you put your finger on the map, under your finger will be a town called Middletown.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I grew up in a town called Lincoln, Illinois, a little farming town, very near Middletown.
Okay.
And, where I grew up, I am looking out onto a Vermont landscape right now. I have spent the last 30 years about an hour south of Montreal in northern Vermont. But I appreciate the vastness of a landscape like I grew up in Illinois, where corn and soybeans stretched out in every direction. And essentially every day as a child was like a game of chutes and ladders.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You just had to be home when the porch light or the street light went on, and we were largely unsupervised. And that allowed me to be an adventurer in my own mind. And
yeah, I think we're pretty close in age. I can remember my mom during the summertime would say, you can come back in the house once the street lights are on. So, or when I call for dinner, and that you were just out all day.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, if my dad came in the door, my dad was a physician.
Okay.
Hard-working guy. He was the kind of physician that took care of you birth to death. You had his home phone. We had the big goofy light on the side of the station wagon that he used to look for house numbers because he made house calls.
Yep.
He was the surgeon, delivered your baby, met you at the emergency room when your kid went through a barbed wire fence on a mini bike.
Sure.
And, if we were in the house when he came home watching TV, my sister, we had a double, an outdoor back door. My sister would sit down there in her mittens and coat so that if she heard my dad come in the door, she could scoot out the back door and come back around as if she'd been outside all the time.
Oh, wow.
You had to make your own adventure.
Yeah.
And that really inspired a level of curiosity in me. I was probably had a curious mind to start with, but I was an artist and a budding scientist even as a kid, and living like that so unsupervised in a place, in a landscape that you felt very much a part of because you could see so far. You could see 25 miles.
Yeah. Lots of sky. The view has lots of sky. Yeah.
Lots of sky. And my dad had a broken down farm that we grew up on. We were part of slaughtering 5 hogs every year and eating every single part of the pig. And so I got an exposure to just everything. We had horses that we could ride through cornfields at breakneck speed. Nobody cared.
Yeah.
The danger.
Yeah.
that we
fall off, but you're not wearing a helmet. Oh, who cares, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And but I met my husband when we were 14. I was a big swimmer. I was at one point, the decision was whether to move to Chicago and train for the 1980 Olympics. And of course, that's the Olympics that no one went to.
Right.
So I learned quite early in life the power of serendipity.
Okay.
So I'm a big believer in not trying to control every single bit of our lives, because so much good happens when you allow a little serendipity. I hope to tell you a story about that in a minute. But anyway, my husband and I met. He was a fabulous basketball player. He eventually became the captain at the University of Kentucky basketball team.
Oh, wow.
He was drafted by the Chicago Bulls in the 7th round. So we started this life together. And then, of course, the vehicle of the professional basketball, or the Kentucky basketball, started us in as global citizens.
Yeah.
He played professional basketball in Spain. We were there. We got Irish passports. So we started thinking of ourselves as a part of the wider world. That is a pretty wide arc coming from where we started, where I never knew anyone who didn't look like me.
Yeah.
when my husband we were starting to date, my mom actually took me in the pantry and whispered to me, he's a Catholic. These were some times, man.
Yeah, that's back in the day.
Yeah, and I mentioned that because all that led to where I eventually landed.
Okay.
Out in the world, we've lived abroad twice. We've traveled to many of the backwaters of the world. We started traveling with our children when they were still in diapers to backwaters around the world. And as a dentist, I remember noticing that my patients' attitude about the future was getting darker and darker.
Yeah.
In about 2010, 11, 12.
Okay.
I mean, we think of the negative news as being something really recent, this constant barrage, but no.
Okay. Well, hang on a second here. Hang on a second. We got to backtrack a little bit because there's still some things, because I know where you're heading on some of these things, and we'll come right back to that. Do you have siblings?
Yes. Okay. So I love this. Thanks for making me backtrack. I grew up with a brother who my dad was we have this in common. My dad was a pilot, a private pilot, just for fun. But my brother became a captain for Southwest Airlines. And I have a sister who is younger than me as well. She became an orthodontist.
Oh, wow.
And so we grew up in a household that really valued education. It was just a matter of doing what you were capable of doing, fully reaching your potential. I don't remember our parents setting unrealistic goals for us, but boy, they were focused in on using all the gifts that you had by accident of birth, coming from a doctor and nurse. And then they were big on making the most of all your unique gifts to reach your full potential.
Okay, so that's exciting to hear, because what I tend to see when I interview people, two types of parental influence. Okay, first is support, like you got, someone who's giving you and guiding you and pushing you to do your best. Okay, then I see a lot of situations that are kind of rocky, where parents didn't have their lives 100% together, might have been involved with all kinds of nefarious things, or abuse and stuff. You should listen to the podcast of the lady that I interviewed. Her dad was an international con man. She moved 63 times. But the point I'm trying to make is it's generally one or the other. It's generally those types. And so the ones that are the rough side, it's generally a motivation that says, I'm not going to be like that. Okay. And then the ones that are on the support side, it's great because those people get launched a little, and so it's either a launch point of positivity and support, or a launch point of, holy crud, I'm not going to be that person. Okay. Or be in that environment. So it sounds like you had a good one there. Were you close to your siblings growing up?
Yeah, I'd say when you grow up on a farm, you or out in the country like we did, or in small towns, your siblings are your playmates, and they're what you make the leaf forts with, and the tree forts.
Yeah, all that good stuff. Yep, that's for sure.
Yeah, and my parents didn't put up with a lot of wackiness from us, so we weren't. They wouldn't let us go into our bedrooms with the telephone and be on it for 2 hours. And of course, there was no computers. So yeah, we were, and we're still very close now. My brother and sister both live on the family farm in Illinois, and I have a cabin in the middle of the family park, kind of between their two halves.
Oh, wow, that's cool. Yeah, growing up, my grandparents had a huge cattle ranch, about 4,800 acres, and ran about 2,500 head of cattle at a time, and just a big cattle operation. And we used to joke that we were the family slaves, because there was never an end of things to do and work. Absolutely. And I can remember my younger brother one time when he was pretty little, and just like 5 or 6, and he came into dinner one night and said, there's never an end of things to do at Grandpa's. And so but it's such a gift, because when you have that environment, you learn how to work, you learn how to be creative. I learned how to weld when I was 10.
Me too.
Yeah. And if there was something that we needed fixed, man, my grandpa's like, go get this and go get that. We had an iron pile. We would create all these crazy things, and learning to weld and fix things. And I could jerry rig just about anything you could think of. And then one of our summer tasks was fixing fence, labor mowing hay, and then working
Yes.
at the sale barn with the cleaning the trucks and the dip tank, and just but I look back and I cherish every bit of that, because throughout my career I've always told people I may not be the smartest guy, which I'm generally kind of in that top range, but I will outwork you, and I will outwork circles around you, and I won't even think twice about it, because that's just how I'm programmed. So it sounds like you had that kind of a background growing up then.
Absolutely. And I did become a welder. I weld giant metal sculptures.
Oh, you do?
Yes, yes, from learning on the farm. You just had to
Well,
fix it yourself.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do. I have a life-size T-Rex sculpture in our front yard that I made out of a car.
You're going to have to
And
send me a picture of that, because I'm the T-Rex. That's been a nickname forever. And
really?
yeah, you see it on my website and stuff.
Okay, great. I
I
can't
got a
wait. And
dinosaur.
you mentioned hay. That's what my husband and I did as growing up. We ran
Yep.
my parents' hay operation. So I was the raker tedderer
Oh,
and
yeah.
Chuck was the baler. And
Yep.
that's back when you had to be able to buck an 80-pound rectangular bale.
Yes, yes, and know how to. Well, we even had sickle blade, mowing. Okay, then you had somebody had to come through and rake,
Yeah,
and
that's what I did.
then you'd bale or put it in haystacks and stuff. And
Yeah.
so, oh, that's
Yeah.
work. That's
Yes,
right.
it is. And that's one of the things that that came out of that for both Chuck and I too, is that we we like to work.
Yeah, yeah,
We like it, and we love having that end of day kind of that we never ate dinner on our farm till 10 p.m. at night.
yeah.
I don't know how my mom did it.
Well, my memories going back to my grandparents' ranch is I can remember times falling asleep at the dinner table because I was so tired, eating dinner, falling asleep. Then you wake up, you go off and go to bed, and you wake up the next morning to the smell of bacon and eggs and cinnamon rolls cooking, and we would have breakfast by 7, out the door 7:30, and that was just how it worked. And I like you, I like to work, and I was just telling a friend this morning, uh, they've got a small farm, maybe 60 acres or something, maybe 6 or 7 head of cattle, and they were talking about some calves being born. And I said, I just miss that. And what I miss about it is, at the end of the day, you come home, you're filthy, you're tired, but you did something that day. You feel satisfied. And so I think it's kind of a sad thing. I wish I got into tech and was going on to it. I wish I would have purchased my grandparents' ranch, because the only problem was it's 6-hour drive, so it's not exactly in the backyard. But
Yeah.
kids today, so many don't have that opportunity.
Yeah. We live in the dairy farming region of Vermont where the Ben and Jerry's cows are.
Okay.
And the guy that we let use all the meadows on our farm that we have here in Vermont is an organic farmer, one of those guys that weighs 111 pounds wet, because he works so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, his dad had a stroke when he was 15 years old, and he had to take over at 15. So anyway, I always try to encourage my son to go down and just spend a day with this guy.
Yep.
That'll either fill you with so much gratitude for your own situation, or it'll set you on a new path. So I do try and encourage people to find out how other people live.
So let's hop over real quick to understanding a little bit about your education, because you made some investments, or your family made some investments on that. Where'd you go to get your undergrad?
So my husband and I were an item. By the time we were seniors, he was being recruited by every college program in the country.
Sure.
And we knew we were soulmates. And so that's it. We were joined at the hip, and we went to the University of Kentucky.
Okay.
And we knew that, so my dad was this wonderful humanitarian, but Rex, we never saw him.
Yeah.
Except
Always
when we were working with him on the farm.
Yep.
He was either in service to humanity in his doctoring life, or he was working till 10 o'clock at night on the farm, one of the two. And we never saw him, and never left on vacation on time. He never coached the baseball. You mentioned that one before we were talking, all the other fathers could do that. Well, the next door neighbor was a dentist.
Okay.
And the one on the other side was a veterinarian. So I have this great love of animals, and I could look over at the veterinarian side of things and say, they never saw their dad either.
Right.
But over there in Dr. Doolan's on the dentist side, he
That's
seemed
regular
to have,
hours. That's regular
yes,
hours. Yeah.
yeah, and he could be a part of his kids' lives. And so when Chuck and I, we both are artists at our core, and and we love science, and so that was a perfect union. We could see, you can't be what you can't see.
Right. Right.
And we could see Dr. Doolan pulling in the driveway every night at 6:05 with his high school cardigan still fitting,
Yep.
and going off with his kids to be a part of their lives. And that's what we wanted. So, and my dad could see what happened in medicine. He could see it coming. He could see that eventually insurance companies would take away the way that he had that role in human beings' lives,
Mhm.
that it would become driven by some other thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he encouraged us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he encouraged us because he could see dentistry was still you're still your own boss, and you could still connect with other human beings in a deep way. So we became dentists, and we went, and Chuck actually chose the University of Kentucky. Well, they won the NCAA that year. They were
Wow.
recruiting him. But we chose the University of Kentucky because they had a dental school right on the same campus.
Sure.
And a really fine one.
Yeah.
So 50 students, most dental schools have 200, and we got a great education at the University of Kentucky and then at that dental school, and then we were off into the world.
Fantastic. What an accomplishment to get to play ball at University of Kentucky. That's one of the premier, that's basketball U. I mean, that's crazy. Between Kentucky and UNC, those are just pinnacle programs. So that's I always had the fortune to play a little bit of college football, but I played, it was considered Division II at that time, but it's now Division I, AA. But I understand the rigors of being, because you're probably chemistry or biology majors or something like that, right? Okay. And I was too, but I made a really poor decision that I thought majoring in goofing around girls and beer drinking was more important than chemistry. And none of my friends were carrying these massive books around and stuff. I mean, this is way before all that good stuff. So now it's okay. I ended up all right. But I was actually wanted to go to medical school or chiropractor or something. And but at the wise old age of 19 or 20, you really make some crazy decisions. And I ended up getting out of the school of business. But anyway, all right. So you went off into the world. You got to go. He got drafted by the Bulls, but you end up in Europe and stuff. In Spain.
Yeah. The measure of what we learned being involved in that, going from age 18 on a farm in Illinois to dropping right into this enormous real world, because at Kentucky, professional basketball was not well developed then.
Yeah.
But Kentucky was the creme de la creme in the world. That was after UCLA and before North Carolina.
Yes.
That was that time slot. I mean, they had a private dormitory, a $5 million building built that just had 12 rooms in it for the players. Wow. They had custom sized toilets. They had custom sized beds. It was it was unbelievable. It was like being dropped off the turnip truck into some other land. But what came of that 4-year period was that we learned how the real world worked. There were our phone lines were tapped. We learned later. There were private investigators that would follow to make sure you didn't get in trouble and wind up in the news. It was the real world.
Yeah.
And we just knew that at that time, professional basketball was not that great a deal. You paid your own expenses, you weren't paid very much, and you traveled 170 days a year.
Yeah.
And when Chuck got a contract for the exact same amount of money for a team in Spain, we had wanderlust.
Yeah.
We just hit the road, and our families thought we didn't even open the contract from the Bulls.
Really?
It was strange. But we just had a compass that drew us out into the world, and that turned out to be a really great.
What an awesome decision, because you could take the standard American dream or go around the world at the same dollar. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it we just knew what we were facing: drugs and women and all those sort of things were becoming just and it was there. It was kind of endemic to the NBA at that point. Of course, it rocketed away from that about 5 or 6 years later. Yeah. But at that time, those were some rough times. And so we had this great life in Europe, and then one thing led to another, and we became Irish citizens. And after dental school, we actually we became quite good with languages. And after dental school, we moved to Italy to practice with an Italian dentist. And, it's one of those paths that one thing leads to another.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you if you actually were practicing while he was playing basketball, dentistry.
Well, yeah. So, the basketball piece of the puzzle came right after college. We had been accepted to dental school, but we asked for deferment.
Okay.
Because we didn't know how long that basketball life would last.
Right.
Like in all professional sports,
Sure.
you never know. And that's exactly what happened, Rex.
Yep.
Chuck was the leading scorer in Spain and the leading rebounder, in all of Europe. And he broke his leg one night in a basketball game. Yeah, so badly that it was real. They had, I don't know if you remember, a very famous soccer player named Maradona.
Yep.
But they so badly that they got Maradona's surgeon to repair his leg. But it really looked like that life was over. Yeah. So he came back and went to dental school and then went back and lived in Italy to practice dentistry.
Okay, fantastic. Well, you have so many things to talk about. I'm already made a decision. There's going to be version 2, maybe 3, just because of the things you've been up to. Do you want to talk about EWC? Do you want to talk about the platforms, your TEDx stuff, your books? Where do you want to steer the conversation today? Because you've done so many things. Okay. And I know that your where you are today is accumulation of all those things, yes. Right? Yes. So let's talk a little. Where do you want to discuss? Because there's a lot.
This is the first, by the way, I've done so many podcast interviews, and this is the first time I've ever been introduced about my personal life. I'm not good about talking about my personal life. I feel like, I feel like other people are the heroes in their own lives. Sure. And I'm just kind of like a guide out here who discovered a bunch of cool stuff that I can share with others. Yeah. So their journey is not so hard. Right. So they can reach, like my parents encourage. So I am just on this mission to help people reach their own potential, reach their true potential by sharing what I've stumbled across, the insight and innovation now because of Ever Widening Circles. So let's start there and then see where we go.
Okay, that works. Let's do it.
Okay. So during my life as a dentist, my husband and I, because of the upbringing that you just had me talk about, so you can imagine that we weren't going to create an assembly line dental office.
No, I can see that.
We focused on keeping the humanity in healthcare.
Right.
That was our number one thing. We found a way to celebrate something in every single patient's life at every single visit. Sure. I don't care. We have patients, Rex, that come on the day their spouse dies. They keep their dentist appointment.
Wow.
And it's because we have kept the humanity in healthcare. When you find somebody who is in service of others, and those relationships are getting more and more rare and so precious. Yeah. So because of that ethos in our practice, we were very aware that this downward spiral was happening, that the negative news was getting stranger and stranger and having more and more impact on people's lives.
Yeah.
People that we'd known who all their lives as being super cheerful, it was harder to help them, to get them to celebrate.
Yeah.
It was in the air. And of course, like I imagine you have done yourself, because you seem this kind of person. I started to say to myself, somebody's got to do something about this. Yeah. Somebody's got to do something. And every time I'd have one of those downward spiral conversations and be like, really. So eventually one day I got an email from a patient I'd known since he was a toddler. And he was writing from a foxhole in a very bleak place in the world. Mm. And he thought of me.
Wow.
And I got to tell you, I have goosebumps every time I tell this story. It was because I had found something to celebrate at every single visit. Yeah. And so he knew me as someone that he could turn to in his darkest moment. So he was pretty down on the world in the future, and what he'd heard from home was terrible. And of course, there in the foxhole, it was terrible. And I had one of those moments, Rex, where that whole somebody's got to do something about changed that I'm going to do something about this. And I went on a rabid search of the internet for some place that I could refer him to for word of insight and innovation and all the things that we're not seeing. And I spent 3 weeks with every waking minute trying to find some place with no agenda, no politics, no commercialism,
Sure.
and that would be appeal to anybody of any generation. And it wasn't there.
Yeah, couldn't find it. I believe that 100%.
Nothing.
I think it's even worse today. Gee.
Oh, absolutely. So one day I just snapped and I said, well, I'm going to create it. And I read this poem by a very famous 19th century poet named Rilke called Widening Circles. It's a great little short poem. I should memorize it so I could say it. But
No.
anyway, I thought of the way that the goodness and reciprocity of goodness, that give and take, always comes and goes in ever widening circles.
Sure.
That's the way it is. What we say, so anyway, I started writing 1 article a day on anything under the sun to prove it is still an amazing world, because I'm a voracious reader.
Yeah.
I'd lived all over the world. I knew that what was out there was much better than what we were seeing.
Right.
And that went on as a passion project till about 2015. And I have my oldest daughter graduated from Harvard. And because of her citizenship, she could have worked anywhere in the world. She's an Irish citizen too. And she looked at the whole world. Of course, I created kids that would want to work for nonprofits.
Sure.
And she looked at all the things she could do in the world. And one day she asked for a formal meeting with me. And she said, Mom, if you'll build the real website and turn this thing into something that can change the future for everyone, I'll join you.
Okay. So what's that site?
Yeah. So that's everwideningscircles.com.
Okay, fantastic. Because those are listening might want to follow along. So ever widening circles.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everwideningscircles.com has been publishing articles about insight and innovation going uncelebrated in mass media since 2014. There's thousands of links and articles there. And no agenda. My brother, who's very, very conservative Midwestern guy, thinks that website is written for him, and my neighbors, who are very, very, very liberal Vermonters, think it's written for them. We've managed to thread that needle.
That's
because
nice.
we focus on things that everyone could be grateful for.
Yeah.
And these are not articles about puppies in mailboxes.
Right.
This is real insight and innovation that no one knows about.
Yeah.
It's really something.
You know, I found that you and I got connected on a booking service app, and it's unlimited the amount of people who are doing amazing things. It really is. And, you know, they're everyday people as far as, you know, their exposure, but they're extraordinary people on the things that they're doing. And it's so nice to have these conversations with people who've been through the ringer or, you know, have created these amazing things. And, you know, they're just kind of average Joe people, they're regular people, you know, when you boil it down. And that's one of the things I've always wanted to bring forward in the way I approach the show is, yeah, you know, success doesn't fall out of the sky. You know, it just doesn't. And you have this opportunity to do amazing things and not be on, you know, the mainstream media, you know, and it's there's an endless supply. The world is still so good.
It is still an amazing world. That is our byline under Ever Widening Circles. It is still an amazing world.
Yeah. Now, is your podcast in association to EWC?
Okay, so let me introduce the Ever Widening Circles universe, because when you create something like that, it makes sense to that it would spawn a whole lot of other good efforts, right? So when my daughter came along, then we had real capacity. It wasn't just me tapping away furiously, because I had like an 8th grader and a high school kid and a freshman in college when I started Ever Widening Circles. But then, so when she came along, it increased our capacity, and we started the EWC Ed. This is a website for education that puts the wonder back in learning. It's super easy. It's just meant for parents, grandparents, kids on their own. You can totally turn your kid loose there. And what we did was we took the Ever Widening Circles articles that had so much good common sense wonder in them that anybody, you know, it's curated for kids of any age to connect learning to the wonder that's happening in the world. So that's a great place for people to spend some time. It's a really good grandparents' place.
Okay.
EWC Ed, it's called. So Liesl started EWC Ed. So now we have the mothership and then this project here. And then along the way, we had this wonderful thing that I want to share with your listeners, because you're probably a charter member of it. And I think probably most of your listeners are too. Okay. There is an enormous wave of goodness and progress going on in the world that almost no one knows about. You are pointing people to it every day. I listened to a whole bunch of your podcasts before our chat today, and you are definitely pointing to this wave that's happening that's not getting celebrated. So along the way, I was talking to a thought leader that we'd written an article about, and he was listening to what we were doing over at Ever Widening Circles with the kid website and the main website. And he said, well, Dr. Lynda, you're doing exactly the same thing as the conspiracy of goodness story.
I love that name, conspiracy of goodness. Yeah, that's great.
So he said, you know the story of the conspiracy of goodness, don't you? And actually, I didn't. So here's what happened, Rex. I'm a questioner. So I dove into the internet to find the story of the conspiracy of goodness. Now, his dad, this thought leader's dad, was the superintendent of schools in Brooklyn. And he said his dad used to always tell this story. So here it is. During World War II, there was a little village called Le Chambon, France, that managed to save 3,500 Jews from the Nazi concentration camps. I mean, these villagers saved thousands of people for years with no formal education and at great risk to their own lives.
Oh, yeah.
So there was a Rabbi Harold Schulweis. This is the farthest back I can find a reference to those three words, conspiracy of goodness. There was a Rabbi Harold Schulweis in 1986 who was giving a talk in Europe about that chapter of history. And he called this talk the conspiracy of evil.
Okay.
So he tells that at the end of his talk, a man stood up in the back of the room who had been a Dutch rescuer. And the old man from the Dutch man said, do you think I could have hidden an entire family in my home for years without the active participation of the milkman, the mailman, and the neighbors?
Yeah.
He said, why does everyone refer to World War II as only the conspiracy of evil? He said, we relied on each other. Yeah, he said, for every one person saved, there were 7 who were rescuers. It was a conspiracy of goodness.
Well, that's a great story.
That's the first time these words, conspiracy of goodness. And when that landed on me, Rex, I knew that what I'd been seeing and what we've been writing about at Every Widening Circles was a part of this wave that you're a part of, this wave that your listeners, every one of your listeners, I would imagine, are doing their own things, large and small, to make the world a better place for others.
Yep.
And that is who we are.
Okay.
We
fantastic.
we are not what we see on social media and the news.
Oh, no. And that's why I always talk about common sense is not extinct. The news wants you to think that. The politicians want you to think that. But the reality it just isn't. It just isn't.
Right.
And there's so much good to be out there.
Mm-hmm. So that was 2018. We went viral shortly after that. Made it to the front page of Reddit, an article that we just exist. By then, we were talking about this movement that we are leading called the Conspiracy of Goodness.
Mm-hmm.
And then that has spawned a whole bunch of other projects. If people really want to know more about anything that I'm saying, my TEDx talk from November was called Exposing the Conspiracy of Goodness.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So there's a 12-minute talk that will really give you the gist of that whole genre of things. And then recently we've created a place where people doing good in the world who want to be learners or doers or helpers can come together.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So that's kind of the arc of everything that's going on. And my whole mission is just to raise people's knowledge about the fact that it is still an amazing world and it's worth fighting for that version of reality to come to the surface.
Well, we will absolutely put your TED Talk on our website and make sure that people have access to that too.
Great.
So what's been your biggest challenge with launching EWC?
Yeah. All right. So so what I've learned, I put in a book recently. I published a book called Happiness is an Option.
Okay.
Back in September. And that's full of all the things I've learned going from ordinary web user to global positive media mogul.
Yeah.
Okay. And the greatest challenge for all of us who are trying to do something good in the world is that the way the internet is constructed, our projects will never rise to the top.
Nope. Nope. Good
No.
friends at Google basically are, people don't even understand how much suppression is going on and the agendas and stuff like that. And, how they manipulate the searches, during the elections and those types of things. It's such nefarious behavior. It's terrible.
Yes. So what's happened is that the internet really, there were 130 websites in 1993. 130 in the whole world.
Yep.
And I can imagine there was no evil geniuses rubbing their hands together at that time. There were a lot of software engineers just running into work today, so excited about how they could connect people to each other and people to information faster and better. But by 2003, there were 40 million websites.
Yep.
And in that 10 years, nobody could get their arms around it. And an organizing principle had to rise to the top, and it became attention. The internet is an attention economy.
Yeah.
Nothing else matters there. No, not about merit. It's not about hard work. It's not about, like you mentioned, rigorous intention. None of that.
Right.
And so what rises to the top had to be related to how people could get our attention. And of course, where that went. It's all about danger and disorder.
Sure. Isn't there a book out there called The Attention Economy?
I do not know. I'm
going to check on that because I'm pretty sure I have a terrible memory sometimes. I mean, I can remember things from 50 years ago, but don't ask me what I did yesterday sometimes. But I believe or either there is a book or there was a lot of written at that time about the attention economy. And now I think that's shifted to the interruption economy.
Okay.
Because
you and I are so on the same wavelength.
We are under so much because of hyperconnectivity. Most people run around with basically a mainframe computer in their pocket from when I grew up.
Yes.
Or more actually. They're running around with all this access to everything. But the question is, can you interrupt them? And can you get their attention? And there's just simple techniques how to do that, but it's crazy because we live in an avalanche of information.
Right.
It's just information overload.
That's right. So and I argue when I speak about this that the attention economy really started back with the advent of radio.
Yep.
When you had access to a whole lot more minds, then all of a sudden it was all about interruption or being outrageous.
Yeah.
That's it. The attention economy is guided by how outrageous you can be to get people's attention or how cleverly you can interrupt their way of thinking and capture and hold their attention.
Right.
So in the book, I teach people these 4 shifts that they can make to start seeing a whole different view of possibility. And that comes because this attention economy thing, it's a double-edged sword. So that when the algorithms started coming into things, we lament algorithms, but actually they give us all the power. Because if we can make 4 small shifts that I learned in this weird, intense 8 years about how to control what you see on the screens in your life, you can train your algorithms just as simply to serve you only what makes your heart soar, only what you clicked. So here's the number one thing: if people remember nothing about what I share, it's that here's the main takeaway: your click is a vote.
It is.
Someone is counting every click you make.
Oh yeah.
And we get more of what we give our attention to.
Oh yeah. They serve it up because they want you to be in there, and then they're going to bring you content that they can monetize based on that. Yes, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So the 4 shifts, we have a document. People don't have to remember this. We have a really nice document that takes 10 minutes to read. It's called the 4 shifts. You can, if you hop over to Ever Widening Circles on the homepage, there'll be a way to get that document called The Four Shifts. It's a 10-minute read. So I'll just give them to you briefly, and then people can go and do some learning there for themselves. But the 4 shifts are, before you click on anything, and by click I mean like, engage, even there are algorithms that are watching how long we pause on things.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So before you engage with anything on the internet, pause. Pause for just a millisecond and shift up from this lizard part of your brain that's always on looking for signs of danger and disorder. Shift up.
Okay.
And then you look at that piece of content and you go, do we need more of this?
Right.
Oh my gosh. If we did now, it's, do we need more of this, right? Like, as a greater good, as a community of people, you can put the word I in there, but I think if we ask ourselves, do we need more of this? We would stop clicking on about 80% of what we used to click on.
Sure.
So the second shift is ignore more.
Yep.
And the third shift is seek signs of goodness and progress.
Right.
Because the internet for now is not built to bring us that. It's built to capture and hold our attention.
Yep.
And so it's all about danger and disorder.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And then the fourth shift is, when you find signs of goodness and progress, share it. Content creators are intensely interested in what we share.
Yeah.
And there's a great study by the World Economic Forum that says if just 25% of us treated the internet like I just described, it would change overnight. It only takes 25% of us.
Yeah, because there isn't some cat sitting at Yahoo or Google, looking at this stuff. It's all algorithms, it's all AI.
Yes,
and
that's right.
If we were to do these things, you're absolutely right. I'm, my main business that I do outside of yapping behind a mic is I'm involved with internet traffic. And right now, one of the pioneering areas that I'm spending a lot of time in is geofencing, location-based, algorithms, and serving up content to people based on where their physical location is, because everything's being tracked. I mean, everything's being tracked.
Everything.
And it's very interesting technology, and it can be used in amazing ways, but you can use it in almost nefarious type things with competitive things. So if somebody steps into your competitor's, geofence, well, then we're going to send you an ad for us, kind of thing. Right. So it's, the people who get all up in arms, and I almost laughed, and I'm sure you would, I didn't mean to take on the side note, but when the knuckleheads of our media companies are all drug in front of Congress, and the congressmen were browbeating Zuckerberg and Dorsey and the crew about, selling ads and all this stuff and the business model, I'm like, are you guys from another planet? Because it's been this way since the beginning, right? I mean, it's been since the beginning. I've always said that, use this term, the lottery is a voluntary tax for people who aren't good at math. Okay. It's really, I mean, if you understand math, you're like, well, why would I do that? Right. So, but then I came up with this one, and that's somebody else's phrase. I don't know who has said that originally, but this is mine. And I say social media is a voluntary profiling tool. People who are not good at profile or privacy. It just isn't. So it's a voluntary profiling tool for people who aren't good at privacy. It really is, because the way that our information is being used for and against us, it's just unbelievable.
Absolutely.
And so, those are out here just popping off on social media and doing those things. Yeah, you're not very good at privacy. You're not very good at your behaviors.
No. And that whole social media landscape. Well, first I want to go back to really make sure I have a clear answer to that question. That was a very long arc I took you on, but the number one complexity that people like you and I face is what I explained, is that if we have really good intention, we won't play the game.
Right.
So that is the trouble. That is the number one problem for me, and has been since the since the beginning. I've never played to pay. Yeah. I know paid to play, and I only sought any consulting outside what we could think of with our own brain. Liesl and I, just maybe a year after 7 years in, I could not afford it because I'm supporting this thing all on my own. And so that's the number one thing, is that the system, the landscape, there's only one landscape for you and I and every nefarious other thing to compete on.
Yeah.
And if they're willing to use nefarious ways to capture and hold people's attention, then
Yeah.
projects like yours and mine are never going to rise to the top.
No. No.
So that's why I have, of the four shifts, I have that seek signs of goodness in progress, because that's what's going to change the future of the internet for all of us. You know, the internet should be a tool,
Yeah.
nothing more. And like a hammer, it can be used to build things or demolish things.
Right.
And we get to decide. That's the beauty I want to leave people with, is that this is no doom and gloom.
No.
Once enough people understand your message and mine, that there are countless good people out there doing countless good things, and then people think about that in their own lives and do it themselves, we will open a new era. I believe we're like tremblingly close to opening a new era.
Well, I'm going to add to your commentary there. For those who've not been in tech, there is a reality of tech life cycles, okay? Whenever you have a leader in one tech version, okay, of things, that leader rarely becomes the leader in the next iteration or generation, okay? It always happens. And so you can go back to the days of mainframe computers, okay? Now, mainframes really aren't a thing anymore, but this is a reality. The three top competitors at the time were AT&T, General Electric, and IBM, okay? AT&T was actually the number one. AT&T is not known for mainframe computers, okay? That happens. And so every time there's been a hop, you know, you went from distributed computing, centralized computing, SaaS type delivery of systems. Every time there's been a hop, the leader never becomes the leader in the next. And it's because of one thing. They are breathing their own vapor. They are locked up in the success. The founders have made boatloads of money, and they just get fat, dumb, and happy, you know, being who they are at that point in time. Now, the people who are really smart today are the companies trying to invent themselves out of business. So, and I know a few of those, okay, but it just doesn't happen. Now, why tell you this? The current leaders and pioneers in social media will not make it to the next round. They just won't. They just won't. So everybody's out there today, they're mad, they're upset, there's censorship, there's all these issues and stuff. But hang on, take a longer view perspective. Those companies will not be around. And there's people who looked at me and then they think I'm crazy. I can remember going into an Uber office and with my daughter and looking at the stuff with Uber, and I just laugh at them. You had these snot-nosed kids who were just thought they were all that in a bag of chips. And I'm like, well, guess what? You're not going to be here in 5-6 years, okay? Because you just won't. That's just the way it works, okay?
That's the way it works.
So I think that it's important for us to understand, take a longer view world of things. There's so much good out there that will override. I don't want to call them evil, but I think there's misguided direction right now in social media. And I think you're going to see a lot of fragmentation because there's going to be a lot of people who are saying,
Yeah.
I've got a better good out there. And then there'll be consolidation because that's just how it works. Okay. You know, 35 years ago when PCs first came out, okay, your laptops and your PC computers, there were about 30 manufacturers. Today, there's only a handful. Okay. Because it went from it went from pioneers to expansion back. So I guess that long-winded, interruption on, talk about your story is the fact that we just have to be patient with this. And we just have to keep doing the good because these things are temporary. They just are. Yeah. And let's not make permanent decisions over temporary things. So anyway.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to do what you can do.
Yeah.
Can I tell you just a few quick stories from the conspiracy of goodness?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I like to use this example of Topher White and the rainforest connection.
Okay.
So we've written 2 articles about this thought leader. Topher White, about 6 or 7 years ago, was an engineer on vacation in Sumatra, and he went to a gibbon sanctuary, and he was standing there like any other tourist. And all of a sudden, all the staff in the reserve started running in one direction in the forest.
Right.
So like any good millennial, he grabs his phone and starts following them, running through the forest. And sure enough, not very far from given reserve in a protected forest where illegal loggers cutting down one of the biggest trees in the rainforest.
Oh my.
And it struck him how strange it was that they could be that close. And the rainforest was so noisy with natural sound that they couldn't hear the chainsaws sooner. So he came back to the United States and he became consumed with figuring out a way, and he did, to use old cell phones to save all the remaining rainforests in the world. So he's got this company called the Rainforest Connection that places old cell phones up in the canopies on the perimeter of rainforests.
Oh,
and
wow.
and they're tuned to only listen to the sound for the frequency of a chainsaw. And the minute somebody fires up a chainsaw, it sends a signal up to the satellite and down to local rangers who can save the forest for the nearby communities, because of course it's their way of life that's disappearing.
Right.
And then eventually, as technologies go, they start to figure out that you could actually detect the illegal loggers sooner. The bird song changed when the illegal loggers entered the forest. So then he tuned these cell phones to pick up only the sound of a change in the bird songs. So, Topher White is out there and thousands of others like him who have come up with these ideas to fundamentally use what we already have. That's what I love about Topher's idea. He's not building cell towers. He's using what we already have in surplus. Old cell phones, tall trees, people who want to save their community.
Yeah.
And these, virtual reality is being used instead of anesthesia in the world. Trees are talking to each other. There's large and small. We wrote an article recently about a busker who's just this guy who loves to play the guitar and sing.
Sure.
So he decided to set up his guitar in the subway, and he has a big sign on his guitar that people can put money in his guitar case, but people can take it out too.
Oh my.
So if you're down on your luck, it's a way to preserve people's dignity. They can take money out.
Right.
I mean, there's the napping friar from St. Norbert's Abbey. He's an older gentleman who loves cats. So he started visiting this cat sanctuary just to pet the cats.
Right.
And he started falling asleep on the couch covered with cats, and they started taking pictures of him because it was so funny. And then they created a calendar that raised $100,000 for the cat sanctuary.
Oh my.
So we've got that's an arc, and we can find our place in it. We might be the next Topher White with the next idea that can save the rainforest, or we might be like the napping monk of St. Norbert's and be able to raise money for our favorite charities. But we all have a place in this way forward.
Fantastic. So, you know what I think I want to do, because you are doing so much and I want to unpack this even further. I think I'd like to sort of wrap this episode up a little bit. And then I want to get you back on as soon as possible, because we have so much more to talk about.
I'd love to.
And I think that would be our audience would love that, because I'll share a thought with you. I'm a guy that likes to fix problems. I've always been a leader. I was the kid in school that was like class president from like fourth grade on, and stuff like that. And so I get bothered when I see things that are not right, and I always want to fix them. And I've never been the guy that's hidden from the right. I mean, I've always been the guy that said, okay, let's go do something about this. So it's much like, what you've done. And my soul is restless right now. It's restless because whenever I turn into gaze at social media, and unfortunately I have to do some of that because of the things that I do for pushing traffic for people, I am just upset to my soul's level of all the wrong that's going on today, all the stuff that's happening. And I am disturbed about our nation. I'm disturbed about freedom. I'm disturbed about just doing things that are right. And so I think this podcast and working with people like you is just sort of an outlet for that, because Yeah, there's a lot of things I'd love to be an impactor on. However, I can't always be the single guy making those changes. But I can tell you, I know that a good percentage of my high school classmates and friends and people I know, their souls are restless too. And we're not going to last just sitting around with restless souls. We just won't. We're not going to take it. You know.
Well,
So
I would love to come back and share a whole bunch of practical tips that
yeah,
I
see, that's
I
what I want to
teach
do. I
people.
want to come back and
Yeah.
unpack that because today's a great introduction. I
Hmm.
mean, I think people are going to
Yeah.
be licking their chops for more. And so it's a lot like a episode I recently did with Dr. Eric Plasker, where we did the interview and met him and learned about what he's doing. But we just recently went and unpacked all of the things that
Yeah.
he's doing and took it to a deeper level. So I really like to do that because I'm
I would
just
love to.
I'm just enthralled and engaged and inspired by what you're doing. And I think we need to help expose a lot more people to good. I think that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the best
So
you can do.
I have one last question for today's episode, and it's pretty simple, and it's something that we do. It helps us learn about you. And if you've listened to episodes, you probably know what's coming. So, everybody has a bucket list out there, things they're going to do. Now, I can imagine your bucket list from the time you were about 20 was about the size of a semi-trailer, but because you've been all over. But I'm a physicist. I'm a physics guy. That's what was my main stuff
Yeah.
back in the day, numbers and stuff. So for every positive, there's a negative. Okay. So you got your bucket list, but there's an opposite list out there. And it rhymes with bucket, starts with an F, but I'm not going to say that. Okay. So everybody has an F it list of things they're never going to do. Okay. I'm never going to do this. And I'll give you a couple while you're thinking for a second of maybe something that might be on your F it list. Now, those who listen to my podcast know this one cold. I will never, ever again, ever do a Lakota Sioux sweat lodge. Okay. The concept of excessive heat, excessive humidity, drumming and chanting at the top of people, just the noise, never. I'm sorry, not signing up for that again. One and done. Never going to do that. Okay. Another one, I'm not eating sardines. I've eaten all kinds of things through my travels, but I don't want to open a can and have something that looks like it can look back at me. So those are two items that would be on my effort list. So Lynda, even some of the basic things like afraid of spiders or whatever it happens to be, what might be a thing or two that would be on your effort list?
So you got to remember that I have this giant natural curiosity
Oh, I
thing.
know. So you're the type of person that's probably going to do probably anything once, right? I get that. Okay. But we're all
And
human. We're all human
yeah,
beings. And you've told us all these cool things about you.
yeah,
But, there's probably these little
I have a thing.
vulnerabilities. Okay.
I have a vulnerability.
Okay.
I totally do. I am afraid of edges.
Okay.
Edges. So I will never, ever go to the top of the Sears Tower in Chicago and walk up to the window and look down. It's not heights. So my brother has the same because of the childhood trauma that happened to us both. He was a captain for Southwest Airlines. So
Sure.
he was a F-15 fighter pilot. Same fearlessness. But we both discovered once when we were riding the escalators up in Chicago, what's the main big department store?
Sears Tower. Yeah.
Oh my God, we both were sweating. So edges. We were both, when we were little kids, we were at this thing called High Bridge in Southern Illinois with my crazy cousins who were all older than us. And Alex and I both remember when we were about 4 and 3 years old that they were holding us out at 4 and 3 over this ravine that was 200-300 feet.
Oh my goodness.
It's just it's barely printed in our brain. But yeah, I will never go do anything that involves me, or actually my legs hurt when I see other people on edges.
That reminds me, when you see those pictures from back in the 20s where they were building the skyscrapers in New York City, and you see these guys eating their lunch on a beam out there.
I can't look at them.
Never, yeah, same thing. Never in 1,000 worlds would I ever be like that, because I was an athlete and still am, but I know I'm clumsy enough just because I'm going to test myself. I would be falling 1,000 feet, because it's just scary.
No, I could jump out of an airplane. I could totally skydive.
Yeah.
At no problem. It's the edge.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to that. I think we can unpack on the next one. So I want to thank you for coming on, Dr. Lynda. It's just been enjoyable Great introduction. And then on this next one, let's come back and really unpack all these tactical things and these strategic things that people can do to change what's served up to them and what's happening.
Absolutely. We can totally do it. That cord, we actually have all the power on the internet, and I'll teach people exactly how to take charge of that.
Well, that's really good news. Okay, so thank you for coming on, and this will call it a wrap for this particular episode. I am thankful for you to tune in, Don't forget to go to the show website, rexandrewshow.com. Dr. Lynda's information will be there, lots of links and cool things. And then, of course, all of our guests that are been on the show, both past and upcoming. So we have a lot of people. Usually have about 30 people in the queue. So until next time, I just have the 3 things I say all the time. Be safe, but be bold, and make it a great day.